and welcome to the event Fast Action Mitigation to Slow Warming in this Decisive Decade. We're very pleased and honored to introduce Dasgupta, CEO of the World Resources Institute, as our moderator for this discussion.
Hi everyone, I'm Dasgupta from WRI, and you made it. You got dressed, you're here, first thing in the morning, so the hardest thing of the day is done. Seriously. First of all, thank you very much for being here. Today's Decarbonization Day. Did you know that? And, when we talk about decarbonization, everyone thinks about CO2. So today, actually, we are not going to talk about CO2. The reason we are here is because there's another pollutant. So excited. Methane, which is actually much, much more dangerous for global warming. Actually, about 80 times more. So the point for us to keep within 1.5 degrees, we have to absolutely figure out how to limit or reduce methane in the atmosphere. So this is the reason we are here. This is the fastest way for us to actually get global warming in check and focus our attention to this topic. The good news, there is good news here. The good news is that 125 countries last year agreed to a methane pledge. I think now it's 130 countries that agreed to reduce methane emission in the atmosphere by 30%, which is a very good news. Now what we have to do is to take that political capital, increase it, but make sure that's happening, that there's money there, that there's solutions there, the technology is there to actually get these pledges to outcomes. So that is what it's about. The second good news is we actually have solutions. This is not that we have to reinvent things. We know what needs to be done in agriculture, on animals, on oil and natural gas. So it is not a sector where solutions don't exist. We actually have a panel of experts here, starting from scientists and activists, so which I'll introduce, which will share with you what can be done at every level on solutions. So our job is to create this momentum, take the political momentum that started in last COP, actually turn this commitment to outcome. So this is what we're going to do. We are very, very happy for our host here, the US Center, but this has been organized together with WRI and the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. I want to start with Gabrielle Dreyfus, Dr. Gabrielle Dreyfus, our scientist here. To start, Gabby, get us the right path in the science. So we need to have the science in place before we can have a discussion about what to do. So if I can ask you to do that first, can we all sit here and see? Yeah, you do that first, come over here, and then we'll start the panel.
Good morning. I hope everyone had a chance to get their coffee because we're going to hit the science hard. All right, can we get the science slides, please? So thank you for the introduction, Gabby Dreyfus, Gabrielle. I'm the other Gabby, if you know Gabby Levy by any chance, she's over there. I'm the chief scientist with the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. Are we good to go? There we go. There's me. That's Rick. He's coming later. Stay tuned. All right, let's hit the science. I got it now? All right. So, why are we here? That's actually a deeper question that science can't answer. But the world is warming. And this is a figure from the second IPCC Working Group 2, so the Adaptation and Vulnerability Report. There's a lot of data on it, but what it's really telling us is that we are facing not one, but two climate catastrophes at the same time. Crises. Sorry. We do have people. It's actually useful to have people in front of the slides because people is what matters here. We like to show a lot of graphs, but what this is showing us is that the world is warming. We're already around 1.1, 1.2 Celsius above pre-industrial. We are very likely to cross 1.5 C in the early 2030s. That's what these curves here are showing, the dotted lines. And if you take that horizontal dotted line at 1.5 across those what are called burning embers diagrams, those scientists are very creative, called those reasons for concern. And you can see that already at 1.5, we're in the yellow to red zones across the 5 reasons for concerns. The closest one is extreme weather and unique and threatened systems. The second one is extreme weather. If you listen to the news, you will be aware that climate impacts are happening today. When I was learning about climate science in grad school a while ago, climate change was something that was going to happen in the future. In the last 10 years, climate attribution science has really shown us that the impacts and the severe impacts that we're experiencing today are already due to climate change. And this means that we need to slow warming today, because the severity of those impacts is only going to increase with every fraction of a degree of additional warming. And if you go all the way to that most reason for concern, that is irreversible tipping points in the climate system that we know, and there's a paper that came out at the beginning of September that assessed about 200 papers of literature. There are systems, so my background is a paleoclimate, so I study how the climate changed in the past. We know that the Earth's climate has changed in the past. We were not there for the big changes as civilization, and there are irreversible tipping points in the climate system that we may start to trigger beyond 1.5. And so this is why we need to slow warming today. So this is a paper that we wrote. I was one of the lead author on, that came out in the Proceedings of the National Academies in May. And what it tells you is that, yes, we need to decarbonize. That is the orange curve. Focusing only on CO2, phasing out fossil fuels as a singular focus, while essential to stabilizing climate in the long term, because carbon dioxide has a long life, it is a slow carbon cycle, we're talking geological timescales, and when you burn fossil fuels that contain sulfur, you actually co-emit reflective aerosols. So as you turn off those CO2 sources, you do turn off CO2, yes, but you also turn off those reflective aerosols. And those reflective aerosols are currently masking about 0.5 degree. And so if you only do decarbonization, you actually increase the rate of warming. So on the left, so this is for the scientists among you. The left graph is temperature. The right graph is the rate of change of warming. And that orange graph, the orange line on the right side, you actually see it increasing. So the rate of warming actually increases in the near term if you only decarbonize. And the way to turn that curve, to slow warming faster, the only way to do that through mitigation solutions is by also intentionally targeting methane and other short-lived climate pollutants that are super potent in terms of far more effective at trapping heat than CO2, and shorter lifetimes. Meaning, if we start cutting methane today, we can start to see the impacts within this decade. So it's decarbonization day, but we're here to say it's decarbonization and that we need to do to keep 1.5 alive. So this is a graph from the IPCC Working Group 1 report that came out August of 2021. What it's doing is turning the individual contributions of all these climate forcers into the temperature contribution since the pre-industrial. CO2, do I have a pointer on this thing? Anyway, CO2 is about 0.7, 0.8 degrees C. But what I have in the orange boxes are those short-lived climate pollutants. And when you add those up, you actually have about half of the positive warming contribution that we are experiencing today is from these short-lived climate pollutants. Methane is about 0.5 degrees. The net warming, like I said, 1.1. So yes, it might be short-lived, but if you keep emitting a short-lived climate pollutant that is super potent, it's going to heat things up. And then, so that shows that there, and then nitrous oxide, don't want to forget nitrous oxide, not short-lived, but also super potent. Actually, one more point on this slide before I move on. When you cut these short-lived climate pollutants in the near term, you actually get 4 times more of the avoided warming by 2050 than CO2 alone. Again, this is not an either-or. This is a both-and solution, because we got to stay alive, keep 1.5 alive, so we can do the marathon to decarbonize. Again, this is from the recent Climate and Clean Air Coalition Global Methane Assessment Baseline Report. Came out just a week or two ago. highly recommend you check out this report because we need to know where we're going. And what this report is looking at is what the potential is. These figures are showing the potential from the combination of decarbonization and targeted methane mitigation. The figure on the left, that black line, decarbonization alone, warming in the near term, but you turn the corner. You gotta decarbonize. If you pair it with a short-lived climate pollutants, in particular methane, you see you bring down that near-term warming, and you actually get 2 times the near-term benefit. The figure on the right, yes, decarbonization, guess what? Methane is a major component of natural gas. You will get some methane abatement if you decarbonize, but only a third of what the potential is. You got to do both. The figure on the right side is showing you if you target methane intentionally, what you can get. And it's significant. Again, you got about 0.2, 0.3 avoided warming potential by 2050. So what is our trajectory absent that intentional focus on methane and other short-lived climate pollutants? The black line here shows this baseline assessment. Based on existing policies and trends, we are actually set to add 13% more methane. That's just anthropogenic methane. I'm not even talking about natural feedbacks. Unless we, again, I'm using the word intentionally, so this will not happen by itself. A lot of people like to point to IPCC scenarios for keeping 1.5, which says you got to decarbonize, you got to cut the short-lived pollutants, and you got to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. Well, those things don't happen by themselves. That's why we're here. You know, we humans, actors, we got to make choices. So baseline emissions, if we do nothing, methane actually goes up. Blue line is constant, just for reference. Green line is what we want with the Global Methane Pledge. GMP, Global Methane Pledge, 30% reduction relative to 2020. How do we get there? Marcelo is going to tell us more about the specifics of this, and my panelists are the solutionists. But the way we get that 150 million tons of methane to reach our target is we have to cut emissions from agriculture, waste, and fossil fuels. Those are the major sectors that contribute to methane emissions. And fossil fuels here, while it is about total human methane emissions, agriculture and fossil fuels are similar in magnitude, but fossil fuels has the biggest potential. There's a lot of methane that is leaked and wasted in the fossil fuel sector unnecessarily, and we can tackle that first, and a lot of that is low-cost options. So at least half of the control measures that have been identified, again, Ani started by saying we have solutions, essentially pay for themselves or come very close. All right, more graphs. I told you I was a scientist. More figures. So this is another of a short-lived climate pollutants. We've been talking a lot about methane, but hydrofluorocarbons. This is what's in your car, your refrigerator, your air conditioning, and your heat pump. Love heat pumps. Come talk to me afterwards. We want to talk heat pumps. It runs on refrigerants, hydrofluorocarbons, and the blue big blob is what would have happened absent agreement by all countries in 2016 on the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. There was an agreement. We're now on that orange curve if we do everything. So the left side is emissions, the right side is temperature. If you take anything away from this talk, emissions distinct from temperature because it depends what you're emitting. And so time, temperature, pollutant. Those are the 3 things I want you to take away from this. And what we have so we have essentially that 0.4, 0.5 degree avoided warming between the blue and the orange, thanks to pink, they updated it, to the Kigali Amendment. So we have success stories, right? We can do this. And we need to start tackling these sources of emissions. Back to methane. We, with satellites and other technologies, have a much better capability now to see methane. I don't know if anyone's seen methane before. Our eyes aren't good at seeing it. But with special measurement sensors, we're starting to see sources of methane like this. This is Turkmenistan. These are leaks, mostly from the infrastructure around oil and gas extraction. This is taken from NASA's EMIT instrument, which is currently on the International Space Station. And So we start to see these things, get a wrench out. This is what we need to fix. And with that, hopefully took away time matters. We're facing two climate catastrophes. We need slow warming now. Methane and short-lived climate pollutants essential to slowing warming in the near term to keep us alive. So the way we like to say it is we are in a sprint to cut short-lived climate pollutants. So we can slow warming now, so we can stay in the race for the marathon to decarbonize, to stay alive. Keep 1.5 alive. And there we go.
Thank you so much. It's working, right? You can hear us? Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Gabby. It's fantastic work and presentation. Three things I want to highlight what Gabby said. One, the science of this couldn't be better. So if anyone tells you, oh my God, we can't see it, we don't know what to do. No, we actually know how to measure it. We know what to do. And that is because of terrific work like scientists like Gabby over years to get us to that. To get to those simple charts, it took years of work to get there. The second thing I've noticed in my team at least, people who work on this, especially methane, they think everyone else is working on CO2 are crazy. That this is the only thing you should be working on. So they're a little bit a crazy group, but it's good. You heard that from Gabby already. And the third thing is that we actually now have to craft solutions based on the science. And the three sectors, it's clear which three sectors we need to work on. Each one has solution, but each one has very difficult political climate. So the question is now, what do we do about it? The best person, at least the most accountable person, what to do about it, is Marcelo. Marcelo Mena is the CEO of Global Methane Hub, is the first initiative, first institution of its kind to assemble funds and fund the right things. Marcelo was a minister before, so he knows how to manage the politics. Marcelo, it would be very good if you share with us, because a lot of people might not know what Methane Hub does, right? What do you do? But what is your priority first? How are you converting this fantastic science to actual action on the ground? Marcelo.
Thank you very much. So first off, when the methane pledge was launched, it was really important that philanthropy came in to highlight that we could actually work together. And so one of the first things that we did was to help the Climate and Clean Air Coalition support roughly 30 countries in having methane mitigation plans. But also, we don't really care if you're in the methane pledge or not. As long as you're willing to reduce emissions, we are there to support. So, for example, China will likely unveil a methane mitigation plan quite soon. And we're working with around 8 NGOs to help that be implemented. I think it's really important. Around 66% of emissions of methane today are in some sort of mitigation target already. So this is really important. But it is a developing country issue that we have to talk about. The things that we are excited about. Yes, it is cost effective to reduce emissions in the energy sector, but it's not happening at the level that we want it to. And so while around 70% mitigation can be achieved at low cost or at negative cost, only 1% of all methane mitigation funding is dedicated to energy. It's just more profitable to extract more fossil fuels. And so therefore, regulations are key. And carbon pricing is key. So what is being achieved with the IRA, with the methane fee, will shift. Because maybe today it's more profitable to extract more oil than cap those leaks. But now you're going to have to pay a fee if you don't. So it's going to change the economics dramatically. And I think that's going to be a really powerful signal. The other thing that I think is going to be important is that this is a developing country issue. So therefore, in Africa, where 93% of all waste is managed on open dumps, we have an opportunity to cut across the bad solutions that we've had before, incineration, or even landfill, and actually divert organic waste directly. Today, we know now that landfills are the biggest point sources of methane in the world. Argentina's landfill, 20 tons an hour, which accounts for around 5 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year. This is huge numbers that we could actually address now, because as we know these leaks, we could actually come in, intervene, cap them, and reduce them around 90%. So just looking at those big landfills, it's a real great opportunity. And as I've met mayors of different C40 cities, they see the opportunity because those are ticking time bombs. They're going to catch fire eventually. So to them, reducing that will prevent odors that and impact the communities locally, but also reducing that risk. Finally, issues like food banking. There's been a food banking world around for many years for multiple reasons, but they've never accounted for what that means for methane mitigation. So now we're also working and linking and supporting governments so they could have food banking regulations so organic waste is diverted either through composting or through other. Finally, we need solutions in the agricultural space. There are some that are coming on, but only applicable to 2% of production systems, and we can actually work on this, starting with the dairy sector with methane inhibitors. But also we can't discount the fact that one of the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions in the food system is actually healthy diets. 30% mitigation according to a Changing Markets report in the European. If people just ate what the doctor orders, that's it. You don't have to get political about anything, culture about anything, just eat healthy. And that will also reduce emissions. I just wanted to say I'm very happy that 30 minutes ago, the IMEO announced the methane alert response system, something the State Department, the EU, and the Methane Hub and Bezos Fund have been putting together for many, many years, including EDF. And so it's going to be launched. We were able to come in with Bezos Earth Fund, and it's going to be online this next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for touching all the three sectors. I think that's very good. Can I ask you one thing? I think the waste in cities is one of the easiest thing that city mayors can do. I hope we can actually get that those solutions exist. Everyone has difficulty regulating methane in the oil and gas sector that you mentioned. I don't want to take a lot of time for others. Do you think that what IRA has on the fee, do you think it's going to be effective? 1 minute. You can have 1 minute.
I think it will. And now we've got the IMF's attention. I was talking to Kristen Gabrielle recently. They see this as a really good tool. Trade and methane fees should be included. We need to have a club of those who leak less to have really benefit better operations. And I think a methane fee and incorporated to trade is something that will be very exciting. There's going to be a World Bank WTO session on November 21st, I believe, on this. So I think it is something that's really, catching the eye of those who have been thinking about carbon pricing and trade. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity because it was unthinkable of the U.S. to have a carbon price a year ago, and it's on the table. So it changes a lot of things.
And it was very good to see also Ngozi's report on WTO mentioned this. So we are in the right path on this. Alice, let's go to you. Alice Reynolds is the president of California Utility Association, and you have a very big responsibility, but also a state that has done a lot to actually make progress on this. So, two questions for you. So, from the work that you're doing in California, what are the best chances of driving down reduction in emissions here? And also, given the political climate, what can states do as a state in a national context, like large states like California? Alice.
Great, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Really happy to be here. Or I should say, it's probably good evening for a lot of you. If, like me, you feel like it's the middle of the night. So I am very happy to be talking about short-lived climate pollutants. It's something that we care a lot about in California, and you heard the reasons why. You saw the slides. Many of you, if you follow California climate policy, you may think about our cap and trade program, our vehicle emission standards, moving towards eliminating the internal combustion engine. So generally, it's about all of our CO2 programs. But we also think a lot, and we have a lot of actions going on in methane. And really, to get it to the second point of your question, I think that one of the most important things that subnationals can do is work on the implementation piece. So if we have national targets, if we have treaties that we've entered into, it's really at the states where we're taking that ambition to action. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that California is doing, but to to provide some context, as California moves to the fourth largest economy in the world, you may think about San Francisco or Los Angeles. Some of our industrial facilities are big cities, but you may not know that our largest industry in California is agriculture. And 75% of our methane emissions come from agriculture, waste, landfills, and forest management. And as you heard, the importance of methane reduction is critical to achieving our climate goals. So one thing that we did to start in California is we set a target. We have a specific target for short-lived climate pollutants, and that's a 40% reduction by 2030. And then in implementing that, we have two main drivers. We think about creating markets for biomethane and then reducing demand. On biomethane, it's something that we do at the Public Utilities Commission, and I should have started with it. At the Public Utilities Commission, we're the regulator for energy and really the primary driver for GHG reductions in the energy sector. And so we do both work on electricity, of course, but also natural gas. And so we started this year with a procurement target for biomethane, so that we're requiring all of our providers to procure to a certain target, and the target advances over time. We have a near-term target and a longer-term target. So we're really creating a market for those emissions that we know we have, the agriculture emissions, the waste sector emissions. And those are all at increasing the GHG reduction, the methane, reducing carbon intensity of our natural gas system. Together with that, we're also working on decreasing demand. So it's really about shrinking the use as our natural gas becomes clean, less carbon intensive. And to do the demand reduction, it does take funding. And so in that sense, we work very cooperatively with our federal government and take advantage of any federal incentive programs, but then also try to drive some of our state investments to demand reduction. Some of the ways that we do this, and then at the PUC, we're building the programs. So we create a program both so the building sector, for example, new construction as well as for existing buildings, two different programs. In the new construction area, we have requirements and incentives for buildings with heat pumps, for water and space heating. And then we include a kicker for those, for HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons. So reducing those provides an extra incentive. So it's really about building the market for heat pumps and electrification through incentive programs. We also have a program for existing buildings. We focus on low-income disadvantaged communities so that we're making sure that we have an equity focus on those programs as we move forward in the transition. So I'll stop there. That's some of the things that we're doing on implementation, and turn it back to you. Thank you.
Alice, first of all, congratulations to all of us, what you're doing in California and how you're moving the needle of actual practice. And I'm so intrigued myself. I come from work in cities, what you're doing for buildings and building efficiencies not other people are doing, so there's lots to learn from the California experience. So I might come back to you if I have time on the energy efficiency question. I want to go to Kristen. Kristen Patterson is the first director, I think, of Drawdown Lift. Kristen, you work on this kind of a macro global issue, but you actually work on families, poverty, how to make sure families are doing well. I would love to hear from you how this discussion on methane actually connect. There's been so much discussion of just transition. How does it connect to families' life welfare getting better? How does the poverty work getting better on the ground? Kristen.
Thank you very much, and nice to be here today. Good morning, everyone. So yes, the Project Drawdown, where I work, actually has a table of the top solutions for climate change. You can find those at drawdown.org if you're not familiar with those. But as Ani said, I lead the Drawdown Lift program, which really focuses on climate solutions that generate clear benefits for improving human well-being, particularly in low and middle income countries in Africa and South Asia. And so there are a few solutions that we focus on that are very relevant to this discussion this morning. So I'd like to talk about a couple of those. So the first is clean cooking. So black carbon, which is a scientific term for soot, is the first solution that really comes to mind when thinking about equity, social equity, and justice in terms of short-term climate pollutions. And in Project Drawdown, we're thinking of clean cooking as one of a suite of emergency brake solutions that we can actually do, very quickly, that are also based in equity. So clean cooking is a very powerful climate solution that has tremendous benefits both for people and from an emissions standpoint, and it really advances gender equality for women and girls. And essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with clean cooking, cooking and heating with biofuels, essentially wood or dung or crop residues, really exposes people who are doing that cooking, particularly women and young children who are around the fires, to health risks that accumulate across their life course. And so some of those risks include premature death due to respiratory and cardiovascular disease, and also burn injuries that really impact a lot of people around the world. More than 300,000 burns around the world occur due to unclean cooking. And essentially, our climate goals and our global development goals can't be met unless we address the crisis around clean cooking. 2.4 billion people in the world still are living without access to clean cooking. And that has an enormous economic impact as well. And one thing in particular that I think is relevant, for this conference is that across Africa, more than 93% of the rural population still doesn't have access to clean cooking. And it's actually increasing because of the rapid population growth that's occurring in many countries. Almost 20 million more people every year this decade are going to not have access to clean cooking, because the clean cooking initiatives are essentially failing to keep pace with population growth. And 6 of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, the DRC, Madagascar, Mozambique, Niger, Tanzania, and Uganda, only 5% or less of the population has access yet to clean cooking. So that's a very important solution in terms of short term. A second solution, which Marcelo already talked about, is food loss and waste. And in the developing country context, it's really not food waste, it's food loss. Post-harvest, a lot of food is lost. 37% of food in Africa that's produced is lost due to poor storage post-harvest and or poor access to markets. And so food can't be sold in time before it's spoiled. And reducing food loss really would go a long way towards addressing food insecurity across the African continent. And finally, there are 2 solutions that were not included in our report, but are really relevant globally, which are things that other speakers have touched on. But refrigerant management is one, and also alternative refrigerants. And so currently, but in the developing country context, when you think about it, currently only about 10% of households in South Asia and Africa have access to air conditioning. And as temperatures rise and urban heat islands increase, people will want and need and have every right to have access to air conditioning to maintain their health, to cool their homes, to keep their businesses going. And so it's very important to think about refrigerant management in terms of global increase in AC units over time. And one really often overlooked point is that refrigerant management, it's the disposal that is key, because most of the emissions occur at end of life, right? When you're getting rid of an AC unit, getting rid of a refrigerator. And so it's really important to focus on managing those emissions. How do you capture those at the end of life? So those are 4 of the top solutions.
Fantastic. I really want to highlight your first solution, which is clean cooking. We always talk about in these halls, solutions with multiple benefits. There is nothing which has more benefits in different ways than clean cooking. In some of the households, their quality is much worse than what it is outside because of what fuel that's being used. And the fact that you just said that we're not catching up, this is a solution that has so much social benefit besides actually global heat benefit. Thank you so much for sharing. I would like, is it 11 minutes I see? Is there 11 minutes left for the whole thing? All right, thank you so much. I would like to open up for question, but can I just, Gabby, is Rick is here? I'll come to Rick in a minute. Gabby, can I just ask you the question Marcelo put in place of measurement? We can't do any of these things that we can't regulate, we can't get without measurements that we can't manage with things we don't measure. There's a lot of progress taking place in measurement, Gabby. If you can bring us up to speed, including the work EDF and others are doing on precise measurement that's locational.
Yeah, so the good news is that we're starting to see the methane thanks to a suite of satellites and other airborne and other types of measurement sensors. And this includes the International Methane Emissions Observatory that Marcelo spoke about, which I think went operational this year and is intended to bring together all of these sources of methane information so that when those plumes, massive amounts of methane are emitted, satellites are good at seeing the massive amounts, they're less good at seeing the constant but low-level sources that come from smaller landfills or agriculture. But for those really massive ones that shouldn't be happening, there really is no reason, especially from the oil and gas sector, for these massive plumes. This methane alert and response system, this MARS system that's coming online, is intended to allow that information to be quickly assessed and communicated to the responsible actors to do something about it. And I shouldn't speak for MEO here, but the intent is essentially accountability that, given a chance, because they should be monitoring, but this is now going to have eyes in the sky to alert responsible parties to maybe go get a wrench, figure out what went wrong, why is that emission happening, and fix it. And so that's a really important tool, arrow in the quiver, for starting to reduce this. But there are a lot of other sources, like the food waste, and it's actually linked to the refrigerant. You need a cold chain for that. There are all these other sources as well. So satellites, definitely shiny object, definitely important, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to complement that.
Thank you very much, Gabby. Rick, are you here? All right. Rick, you take the podium. That's the best way to do it. All right. So, Rick, first of all, this is Rick Duke, Special Envoy, Deputy Special Envoy, U.S. State Department. The reason we wanted Rick to be here, U.S. has really taken a very positive, comprehensive approach to it, and we wanted Rick to share where we are and how you're driving this.
Thanks, Ani, and thanks everyone for paying attention to this crucial topic. And I'm just going to start with the metaphor that IGSD and WRI and others have really started to popularize and that we think is apt. And that is that, of course, we need to run the marathon to complete the global energy transition as quickly as we can. We have to do that if we're going to stabilize long-term climate. But we also have to be mindful that because of aerosol dynamics and other complexities, we don't get a lot of net cooling benefit out of that marathon until after 2050. It's decisive for later in the century, but it really is maybe a tenth of a degree net benefit by 2050. So we have to run two races at once. We've got to also run a sprint dealing with fast mitigation. And fast mitigation is something we know how to do. We actually have had an incredible, really unique global success in addressing short-lived climate pollutants through the Montreal Protocol in the form of waves of regulations that have most recently culminated in the Kigali Amendment that I was proud to be a part of working for under the Obama-Biden administration. The set of outcomes that we have achieved together globally in the Montreal Protocol addressing F-gases have actually avoided over 2 degrees C by 2100. And most of those benefits are front-loaded because it's a short-lived, potent climate pollutant. And so with the Kigali Amendment, which I will also just note, we are proud to have just gotten through the U.S. Senate on a bipartisan basis, a political miracle, and we've just ratified, joining Brazil and a whole range of countries now. We've also just bumped up our budgets for implementing the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol by about 60% so that we can do more and more quickly on phasing down HFCs, on baking cooling efficiency into the transition past F-gases in air conditioning. And we invite other donor governments to step up and join us in what is an incredibly precious and efficient mechanism in the Montreal Protocol to get work done together. So on HFCs, we've done much of what needs to be done. There's more we can do, but there's much that has already been accomplished. So next up is methane. Methane that's already in the atmosphere is causing fully half a degree centigrade of today's 1.2 degrees of climate change. And there's no faster way to pump the brakes on climate change than to cut methane. At this point, having tackled HFCs and F-gases more broadly, we gotta tackle methane together. And we have to do it with maximum speed and purpose and creativity. And so I'm so grateful to Marcelo Mena and the $360 million in philanthropic support for grant support to take action on methane. By the way, building on prior foundation support in a timely way for $50 million in Fast Start finance to help us secure the strong and timely Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol in an announcement that Secretary Kerry made at the UN General Assembly September of 2016 and helped us land the Kigali Amendment. Foundations stepped up again now with $350 million to help us move faster on methane, and Marcelo is making it happen. So we need to work together as governments, as civil society, and we need to keep the methane topic higher and higher on the agenda, because right now, less than 2% of climate finance is going to address methane, and yet it's half a degree centigrade, nearly half of today's climate change. And we simply cannot deliver on the promise of the Paris Agreement unless we tackle methane quickly and completely. If we deliver on the Global Methane Pledge, which has already secured the support of more than 130 countries, and watch this space, we expect many more this week. If we deliver on that Global Methane Pledge and cut methane at least 30% by 2030, then we can actually be serious about keeping 1.5 within reach. It's the only way to do it, that and the energy transition. And we got to do a bit more than that. So we got to tackle some things like N2O. N2O is a little bit the forgotten greenhouse gas. 6% of greenhouse gas emissions globally doesn't come with the same sulfate unmasking dynamics that we see for the energy transition. So it's pretty fast, even though it's not a short-lived climate pollutant. And watch tomorrow for some really exciting announcements around the fertilizer efficiency challenge that President Biden put forward at the Major Economies Forum last June. There's going to be really positive partnership on that, again with a philanthropic component, but mainly government stepping up and working globally to address the food security crisis by tackling end-use efficiency of fertilizer application globally. And we think that this is a key part of what needs to happen in addition to transitioning to green ammonia and ultimately to things like nitrogen fixation crops and other advanced solutions and alternatives to fertilizer. We have to do all that as well. And so we have a lot to build on with the Montreal Protocol successes. We have a lot happening on methane, and we have some things we really need to get going on in the form of N2O action. But so great to see all of you here today. Thanks, Ani, for the chance to join, and thanks for what all of you are doing to help make it happen. U.S. government is highly committed to this agenda, and we're looking for ideas and creativity from all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you. You can all see why we wanted Rick here. I just want to say, Rick, what the administration is doing on this topic has created a real momentum. And plus also what you're doing with Canada and Mexico together for the whole North America is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Rick. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
We have 1.52 minutes left. Marcelo, I want to give this to you because I want you to connect what we're hearing here. What is happening in the last few days? Today's the 5th day, I think. Seems like weeks, actually. But what are you hearing here that encourages you or discourages you on the mission we have in hand?
I'm excited that we're able to put and leverage additional funding. So next week, the COP presidency has a waste initiative, 50% reduction. So Bloomberg, Secretary Kerry, Methane Hub launched support for C40 cities to tackle methane right away. But also Canada had supported Chile on methane mitigation in organic waste. And we wanted to continue that program. And when they saw that it was continuing, they actually also said, let's tap it up again. And so they are committing to additional $4 million for Caribbean organic waste management. Carbon Mapper is coming in with working with NASA to identify the 3,000 biggest landfills. RMI and CATF were working together with this waste map to put all that together. So it's stitching collaborations across the world. And it's something that I think philanthropy could do, because we could move fast and actually connect the dots. So the full package on waste management is going to be around $23 million, which philanthropy only contributed to a fraction. So I think it's really great and highlights that we are actually focusing not on the global north issues, but actually how to solve the developing countries' problems on waste management.
Very happy to hear your summary. Thank you very much. Thank you for what you're doing. I can't summarize the super smart people, but I just want to say three things. One is, this is a super important issue that we can make progress on. You heard all the people here. Solutions exist, from macro solutions to oil and gas to micro solution in a household. These exist. We actually have to transfer them. The second thing is, it is the smart investment to make. It is something we can actually get going. It is something we have political momentum on. So I hope as you move forward, you actually talk to everyone about what you heard today. And the third, there are existing platforms. Marcelo is running one. Gabby mentioned CCAC. There's a Clean Air Coalition that actually is trying to bring this partnership that you talk about, which is critical for us to make progress. Thank you very much for all of you being here. Please join me in congratulating this fantastic panel. Thank you.